According to the U.S. Transportation Corps official record of operations overseas, the U.S. Army 14th Port at Southampton, in addition to handling the greatest part of the troop and vehicle embarkation program during Operation Overlord, with its sub-port at Poole, was responsible for approximately 90% of the rail equipment shipped aboard LSTs, sea trains and ferries. During this period, the port handled no fewer than 3,517 vessels and landing craft. Cherbourg was the only deep-water port available on the continent, but virtually no part of the harbour was clear from mines. Both US and British vessels participated in the clearance operations, all under the direction of Commander John B. G. Temple of the Royal Navy. The start of unloading did not, of course, await the completion of the demining task. 4 areas of the port were earmarked as a priority. Unloading was made difficult by the initial lack of deep-water berths. Until such facilities were available, all ships had to anchor in the roadstead or outer harbour and discharge to lighters, ducks and barges for movement to the beaches or the basins of the commercial port, where supplies were transferred to trucks or freight wagons. Because of the double handling involved, such operations were costly in labour and equipment and in time. Moreover, the volume of cargo which could be handled in this way was always limited. Ducks had a rated capacity of only 2.5 tons, although orders were given in mid-August to overload by 100%. Development of the Nouvelle Plage was not a complicated or elaborate reconstruction job, since the beach was simply to be converted into landing point for ducks and LCTs. However, not until the 14th of July were the western ends of the outer and inner roadsteads declared free of mines, and on the 16th of July 4 Liberty ships entered the harbour. Late in August, attention shifted to the eastern quay, the Quai l'Ancien, Arsenal and Avant-Port, which eventually could accommodate 8 barges, and the Bassin à Flot, 13 barges and 6 coasters. Together, the 2 basins had a capacity of about 2,000 tons per day. The seaplane base, where a concrete ramp or hard already existed, provided facilities similar to those at Nouvelle Plage. The ramp there was widened and its craters were filled. In addition, rail lines were built down to the water's edge so that rolling stock could be discharged directly from LSTs. When completed, the seaplane base was wide enough to accommodate 6 LSTs discharging simultaneously and could also be used by the ducks. Similar accommodations were constructed in the reclamation area at the eastern end of the harbour. A concrete apron had been laid to accommodate 6 further LSTs. 3 berths were intended for the discharge of vehicles and 3 for railway rolling stock, for which purpose railway lines were laid to the water's edge. The first delivery of rolling stock at this point was made by a converted LST on the 31st of July. One of the most ambitious construction projects was carried out in the basin bounded by the reclamation area and terre-plein and the Quai de Normandie. This area was never developed for unloading operations, and its sea walls were undamaged. A timber platform 42 feet wide was built on wooden piles straddling the sea wall, to form a wharf at which barges could discharge. It could accommodate 41 barges at a time and was served by 52 stiff-legged derricks, which could transfer cargo directly onto railway wagons. Rehabilitation of the northwest corner of the harbour had been given high priority, and work began there within a week of the port's capture. The Dige d'Orme was particularly valuable for its promise to provide badly needed deep-water berths for Liberty ships, which could discharge directly to the railway lines running the entire length of the mole, and also berths for train ferries bringing in locomotives and rolling stock. At the shore end of the Dige, a portion of the quay was selected as a pierhead to accommodate the Twickenham ferry, specially built to carry locomotives and rolling stock. 2 berths were provided, one of them consisting of a seat that could accommodate a ramp lowered into position by the ferry, permitting rolling stock to roll from the ferry to the quay, and the other providing a site where locomotives could be lifted from the ferry to the quay by means of an overhead crane, which was part of the vessel itself. The Twickenham made its first delivery 65-ton diesel-electric locomotives and other rolling stock on the 29th of July. All of the stock being unloaded by means of the overhead crane. It was desirable that clearance be accomplished by rail, for rail transport was more economical than motor transport and capable of handling much larger tonnages. One of the principal bottlenecks, which all the inspections recognised, was the lack of adequate rolling stock needed to clear the port. As long as US forces were confined to a small Normandy bridgehead and dumps and depots were within easy reach of the port, motor transport was, of course, the most efficient means of clearance. But the railways eventually were expected to handle the bulk of tonnage. The first important change occurred with the transfer of control of all the rail movements involved in the clearance of the port. It now gave Port Commander the authority he had previously lacked to coordinate all the functions connected with unloading and clearance. This change undoubtedly accounted, at least in part, for the prompt improvement in Cherbourg's performance. Unloadings averaged 14,600 tonnes per day in the first week of November, and in the third week the port achieved the best performance with an average discharge of 15,600 tonnes. However, Cherbourg had hardly achieved this increased efficiency when its importance began to decline. The opening of other ports, notably Antwerp, at the end of November, relieved Cherbourg of its heavy responsibility. For many weeks it handled fully 50% of all the US tonnage brought to the continent. As the only major deep-water port available in the period of the greatest stress, Cherbourg served as the mainstay of the entire continental port system through which the Allied forces were supplied.